Welcome back, guys, to Wrong Turn Horror in tonight's episode. I'm sharing 10 true, terrifying encounters on icy roads in November. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe the channel and hit that bell icon so you never miss a horror story. Also, let us know from where you are watching and what time it is there. So grab a blanket, turn off the lights and let the snow tell its story. The snow was relentless that night, flakes tumbling from a black sky, swallowing the highway in a pale, unending shroud. The world outside looked like it had been erased. No sound, no color, just white stretching endlessly into the dark. It was the kind of cold that crept through the steel of a truck, through layers of clothing, and settled in your bones like an uninvited ghost. Evan Moore gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles pale in the dim dashboard light. His old Ford Ranger rattled against the wind, its wipers squeaking uselessly over a windshield that frosted again almost instantly. He was used to driving nights like this, long shifts delivering supplies between Redfield and Ash Hollow, but tonight felt different. The silence pressed against his ears. Even the radio had gone quiet, giving up somewhere back near the state line when the signal died. He hadn't passed another car in nearly an hour. The storm had worsened, and most drivers knew better than to be out here. The road twisted through miles of empty forest, the kind of place where help didn't come quickly. A single wrong turn and you could disappear until spring thawed the world again. Evan leaned forward, eyes narrowed against the swirling white blur. That's when he saw her. At first, it looked like a shadow, a shape, just beyond the edge of his headlights. Then the beams caught fabric, movement. A figure standing at the side of the road. A woman. She wore a long grey coat that blended almost perfectly with the snow. Her hood was pulled low, her arms stretched out, thumb raised. Evan's stomach tightened. No one should have been out here walking. Not in this. But the sight of her alone, shaking, half buried in drifting snow, triggered something in him. He eased his foot off the gas and pressed the brake gently. The truck's tires slid a little before gripping again. He rolled the window down an inch, letting a breath of icy air rush in. "You okay, ma'am?" he called out, his voice muffled by the wind. She didn't answer, she just turned her head toward him. Even from that distance, he saw how pale she was. Her lips were blue, eyes wide and glassy, like someone half frozen. She took one step closer, and in a voice barely audible over the wind, she said something that made his skin crawl. "Please," she whispered. "My baby's cold." Evan hesitated. He wasn't heartless. He'd driven this route for 10 years and helped more than a few stranded travelers. He told himself she was just a desperate mother. Maybe her car had broken down. He unlocked the passenger door. "Get in. You'll freeze to death out there." She opened the door and climbed in slowly. The air in the cab instantly turned colder, as if the storm had followed her inside. Evan turned up the heat, rubbing his hands together. "There's a diner about 10 miles ahead," he said. "We'll stop there. You can warm up." The woman didn't respond. She stared out the passenger window, her breath fogging the glass in slow, shallow bursts. Her coat was wet, crusted with ice, and strands of dark hair stuck to her cheeks. She smelled faintly of wood smoke, and something else, metallic, like old rust. Evan tried to make conversation. "What happened?" "Your car breakdown." Silence. He glanced over. Her lips were moving, whispering something he couldn't quite catch. "Sorry, what was that?" he asked. She turned her head slightly toward him. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The snow," she murmured. "It never melts where we died." Evan's hands froze on the wheel. "Where you, what?" But she didn't answer. She just kept staring out the window. He told himself she was delirious, maybe suffering from hypothermia. He'd heard it could cause confusion, hallucinations. Still, something about her tone-flat final burrowed under his skin. He turned the radio knob just to have some noise, but the speakers only hissed with static. The road wound deeper into the forest. Trees leaned in close on both sides, their black silhouettes flickering through the snow like tall, watching figures. Evan's eyes flicked toward her again. She hadn't moved in several minutes. Her hands rested stiffly in her lap. Her coat. It wasn't just wet. It was frozen. The sleeves glittered faintly in the dashboard glow, thin layers of frost creeping across the fabric. That's when he noticed something strange. The seat beneath her was dry. Completely dry. He stared. No melting snow. No damp marks. Just clean vinyl and an unnatural chill. His heart picked up. He reached toward the heater controls and froze. The temperature gauge had dropped fast. 10 degrees in less than a minute. The air in the truck turned sharp and biting. Frost began forming on the inside of the windshield. Delicate patterns spreading outward like veins. Evan's breath came out in white plumes. He looked back at the woman. Her head was bowed slightly, whispering again. He tried to steady his voice. "Hey, who are you talking to?" She didn't answer. Her eyes shifted slowly toward the back seat. Evan hesitated, then glanced in the rearview mirror. A shape, small, bundled in a blanket, his stomach flipped. There had been nothing in the back seat when he left Redfield. He knew that. He'd cleaned the truck out earlier that day. He blinked hard, looked again. The shape was still there, motionless, faintly outlined beneath the old dome light. The woman's whisper grew clearer. "He's still waiting." Evan's voice shook. "Who's waiting?" "My baby," she said softly. "My baby's cold." The words hit him like ice water. He swallowed hard, trying to think. Maybe she'd hidden something in the back earlier. Maybe he hadn't noticed, but even that thought didn't hold. The blanket had appeared too suddenly. He forced his eyes back to the road, trying to focus, but the image burned in his mind. A small figure, unmoving, wrapped tight. The storm outside worsened. Snow slammed against the glass like 1,000 ghostly hands. Evan's nerves stretched thin as wire. He needed to stop. Needed to get her out of the truck. He pressed the brake too hard. The tires screeched on the ice. The truck fist-tailed, sliding sideways before coming to a stop at an angle across the road. He turned toward her, voice trembling. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but you need to tell me the truth. Where's your car? What's in that blanket?" The woman slowly lifted her face. Her eyes looked wrong-clouded over like frozen glass. Her lips cracked when she spoke. "I told you," she said. "My baby's cold." Evan's pulse thundered in his ears. He turned round fully now, staring at the blanket. It moved, just slightly. He froze. A small sound came from within its soft, wet breathing. "Is he alive?" Evan whispered. The woman smiled faintly. Her teeth were blackened, jagged. Not for a long time. Something inside him snapped. He reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't move. He pulled harder. The locks clicked down on their own. Every one of them, What the hell? The engine cut off. The hum of the heater died. The radio, the dash lights, everything went dark. Only the wind screamed outside now. A hollow wail through the trees. Evan twisted in his seat. Stop it. What do you want from me? But she wasn't there anymore. The passenger seat was empty. The temperature plunged instantly. Frost spread across the inside of the windshield, the dashboard, even his steering wheel. His breath came in short, ragged bursts, fogging the glass before freezing in place. Something shifted behind him, a small sound like fabric brushing leather. He turned slowly, terrified to look. The blanket in the back seat had vanished. The seatbelt hung fastened, tight, pressed against the indentation of a small body that wasn't there. And then he felt it. Fingers, cold, fragile fingers brushing the back of his neck. He froze completely. A whisper came next, so close it brushed his ear. Drive us home, Evan screamed, twisting forward. The engine roared back to life on its own, headlights flaring bright through the snow. The truck lurched ahead as if pulled by invisible hands. The steering wheel resisted his grip, jerking itself toward the right. He fought it, yelling, "Stop. Please." The road ahead curved sharply toward a bridge over a frozen creek. The truck didn't slow. The accelerator pressed itself to the floor. The woman's voice echoed through the cab, no longer soft but hollow, echoing home. Take us home. Evan yanked the wheel, tires skidding. The truck slammed through the guardrail. Everything went white. When daylight came, the snow had stopped. The state troopers found the truck half buried in a drift beside the creek, engine still running. The headlights glowed dim through the frost. Inside, Evan Moore sat slumped over the wheel. His skin was pale, rimed with ice. The coroner said his body temperature was far below what it should have been, like he'd been dead for hours before they found him. But what baffled them most wasn't his body. It was the interior of the truck. The passenger seat was covered in a fine layer of frost, the vinyl marked with the perfect impression of a human form, a woman's form, and in the back seat there was a smaller indentation, like a child had been sitting there. No footprints led to or from the truck, just the wind-swept snow. Locals still talk about that stretch of highway, about how, on some nights, when the air is cold enough to sting your lungs, drivers see a woman standing by the roadside, grey coat, who'd pulled low. She doesn't move, doesn't wave, just stands there, holding something small and still in her arms. Some drivers say if you stop, if you open your door, she'll climb in without a word. You'll feel the cold spread through your chest, hear the faint sound of a baby crying somewhere behind you. Others claim that if you drive past without stopping, you can still see her in your mirror standing dead center in the road, her face pale and watching until the storm swallows her again. The storm hit faster than anyone expected. By the time Laura Grant realized how bad it had gotten, her phone had lost service, the temperature had plunged below freezing, and the forest road she'd taken to cut time had vanished beneath a thick blanket of white. The world outside her windshield was just a wall of swirling snow, the headlights bouncing back uselessly into her eyes. It was supposed to be a quick drive, just 3 hours from her university dorm in Iron Ridge to her parents' cabin near Crystal Lake, She'd done it a dozen times before. But November had other plans that night. The snow had started around dusk, soft and gentle, and by 9 it was an avalanche from the sky. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. She leaned closer to the windshield, squinting at the faint outline of the forest road. Every now and then, dark shapes of pine trees flashed by like black pillars watching her pass. Her little sedan groaned and fishtailed, tires struggling for grip. She told herself she'd make it to the old ranger's station just ahead 5, maybe 6 more miles. Her dad had always said, if you get caught in a blizzard up there, head for the signal tower. It's old, but it still works. That's what she clung to. That faint memory of safety. A beacon, but then she saw something that made her stomach not dot. Through the chaos of white, she thought she saw headlights, parked maybe 50 yards up the road. A car, half buried in snow, its hazard lights flashing weakly. Relief washed through her chest. Someone else was out here. Maybe they needed help, or maybe they could help her. She slowed down and pulled alongside. It was a dark blue SUV. The windows were frosted over, but the driver's door was cracked open. Laura hesitated, her breath fogging the inside of her glass. "Hello," she called, cracking her own window. Her voice disappeared into the storm. She turned off her engine and stepped out. The wind hit her like a wall sharp. Icy, alive. Snowflakes stung her cheeks as she trudged toward the SUV. Her boots sank deep with every step. The crunch loud in the muffled silence of the storm. When she reached the door, she pulled it open farther. No one inside. The headlights flickered weakly, illuminating an empty driver's seat and an untouched passenger seat. The keys still dangled in the ignition. Then she noticed something. The interior light was on, but there were footprints in the snow. Small ones, bare feet, leading away from the car toward the forest. She froze, staring at the prints. They were shallow, fresh. Someone had walked away into the trees. Without shoes, a whisper of wind hissed through the branches. The forest beyond looked black and endless. She tried again, louder this time. "Do you need help?" No answer. Only the creak of the SUV settling under the weight of snow. A rational voice in her head screamed to get back in her car, to keep driving. But another voice, a quieter one, told her that if someone was lost out there in this cold, they wouldn't last long. She grabbed her flashlight and followed the footprints. The trees closed in almost immediately. The beam of her light barely cut through the thick, spinning flakes. Each breath came out as white mist, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. The footprints wound through the trees, uneven and hurried, as if the person had been running. After a few minutes, she began hearing it, a faint sound beneath the wind, a high, electronic tone. Beep, pause, beep. It was steady, distant at first. She thought it might be the sound of her phone trying to reconnect to a tower, but when she checked, the screen was still dark. No service. The sound came again. Louder, now beep, beep, beep. She turned toward it. Her flashlight flickered as if the air itself were interfering. She followed the sound, heart thudding. Then, through the snow, she saw a faint red glow blinking in the distance. It was a signal tower, the one her dad had told her about. The old emergency repeater that the rangers used before they shut down the station. It stood tall, skeletal, half swallowed by the storm. Its single red light blinked through the snow like an eye that refused to close. Relief flooded her chest. Thank God. But then she noticed something at the base of it. A figure. Someone was standing there. They were small, hunched, facing the tower. The red light pulsed over them, in slow rhythm illuminating a thin figure with long hair, wearing nothing but a white dress, barefoot. Laura's voice trembled. "Hey, are you okay?" The figure didn't move. She took a cautious step closer. The snow crunched underfoot. "I saw your car," she called. "You shouldn't be out here. It's freezing." Still nothing. As she approached, she noticed something strange. The snow around the figure wasn't settling. It was swirling upward, as though the wind reversed itself there. Then the beeping changed. It sped up, faster. Beep, 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 the flashlight flickered violently. Laura stopped dead. What the hell? The figure turned. Her skin was the color of candle wax, her hair plastered to her face with frost. Her eyes wide and black. No whites, no light. Just voids. Laura stumbled backward, breath catching in her throat. The figure opened her mouth. A low static sound came out, like a radio caught between channels. Laura screamed, turned, and ran. Her boots slipped on the ice, her breath ragged as she crashed through the trees. The red light of the tower pulsed behind her like a heartbeat. She reached the SUV again, slammed the door, and locked it. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone. Still no service then. She heard it beep. Her head snapped up. Beep. The sound was coming from her own dashboard. Beep. The radio had turned on by itself. The screen glowed faintly red, scrolling through stations. She tried to turn the key, but the ignition clicked. USE LESS LY dot beep beep beep. Then dash static. Through the static came a voice. "Come back." Laura froze. "What?" "Come back." The voice was faint, broken. "You left us in the snow." Her throat went dry. "Who is this?" The static grew louder, drowning her words. The temperature in the car plummeted. Frost spread across the inside of the windshield in branching veins. She looked up, and through the frost, she saw her, the woman in the white dress, standing just outside the driver's window, her face pressed against the glass, her eyes black and endless. Laura screamed. The woman's voice came through the radio again, overlapping with her whisper outside. "You left us in the storm." The glass cracked under invisible pressure. Laura fumbled for the door handle, but it wouldn't move. The locks clicked down on their own. "We called for help." The headlights of the SUV flickered and died. No one came. Then everything went black. When she woke, it was silent. The snow had stopped. The grey morning light seeped through the windshield. Her phone buzzed faintly. One bar of service, she gasped, scrambling to grab it. "Hello, hello, I need help. I'm stuck near the Ranger Tower. There's someone." Her words stopped. The seat beside her wasn't empty. There was frost melted in the shape of a person, the faint outline of a handprint on the inside of the glass. Laura flung the door open, stumbled into the snow, and looked round wildly. The forest was quiet now, still and empty, but when she turned toward where the tower had been, it was gone, just open field and snow. Her knees buckled. No, it was here. Then her phone beeped again. A text appeared on the screen from an unknown number. One new message. 11:58 p.m. Help us. We're still waiting by the signal. The time stamp froze her blood. 11:58 p.m. That was last night. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a picture message. She hesitated, then opened it. Her heart stopped. It was a photo taken from inside her car. From the back seat, the image showed her, asleep in the driver's seat, her face pale. Her eyes closed, and behind her, in the darkness, a faint silhouette of a woman leaning forward. The message below read, "You shouldn't have followed the footprints." They found Laura's car 2 days later, after the storm cleared. It was discovered miles from the marked road, engine dead, battery drained. The driver's door was open. No signs of a struggle. Her phone was still inside, frozen to the seat. Investigators recovered the last photo, one she had received, but no one could trace the number. There were no footprints around the vehicle, just a single red light blinking faintly in the distance. When rescue teams went to check, they found the old Ranger Tower had collapsed years ago, burned down after a lightning strike in 1989. The area had been abandoned ever since, but locals say that during heavy snow, if you stand quiet near the edge of Crystal Lake Forest, you can still hear it, the faint, rhythmic beep of an old radio tower calling out through the storm. Some say it's just interference, a leftover frequency bouncing between the hills. Others say it's the signal Laura followed that night, the one that calls out to anyone foolish enough to listen. A voice whispering through static, "Help us, we're still waiting by the signal." The lake had frozen solid by the second week of November. It was early that year, earlier than anyone in the small town of Elk Hollow could remember. Most winters, the lake didn't freeze until December, but now the entire surface stretched out like a mirror of pale glass, smooth and still under a grey sky that never seemed to brighten. For Mark and Jenna Collins, that first freeze meant a quiet weekend getaway. They'd bought a small cabin at the north edge of the lake 2 years earlier, a simple wooden place with a wood stove, a dock, and the kind of silence you couldn't buy in the city. It was supposed to be their escape from the noise of life. But that November, the silence felt different, heavier. The drive up was long, through snow-choked back roads and thick pine forests. By the time they arrived, the sun had already sunk behind the hills. The cabin's windows were rimmed with frost, and the lake out front glowed faintly under the rising moon. It looked beautiful, untouched. But Mark noticed something strange. The moment he stepped out of the truck, there were footprints leading out onto the ice. Bare footprints, small, like those of a child. They began near the dock and stretched halfway across the lake before vanishing into the pale distance. Probably kids, Jenna said, wrapping her scarf tighter. Maybe from one of the other cabins. But Mark frowned. The closest cabin was miles down the road, and those prints weren't fresh. They were frozen in place, like the ice had swallowed them. He stared at them a moment longer before shaking it off. "Come on," he said. "Let's get the fire going." Inside, the cabin was colder than he remembered. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and something else, a metallic, almost earthy scent, like old water left to rot. He lit the stove while Jenna unpacked. Soon, the room filled with the crackle of fire and the slow hiss of thawing air. They cooked dinner in silence, both of them tired from the long drive. Outside, the snow fell softly, the world wrapped in white. Later, as they sat by the fire, Jenna dozed off in the armchair with a blanket over her knees. Mark poured himself another drink and stared through the window at the lake. The moonlight shimmered across the ice, pale and ghostly. The footprints were still there, perfectly outlined, but now he saw something else. A light dot, it flickered faintly beneath the ice, deep below the frozen surface. At first he thought it was moonlight reflecting oddly, but no, it moved, slowly side to side, like someone walking beneath the surface with a lantern. He leaned closer to the glass. Squinting dot, the light stopped, and for a moment he swore he saw a face, pale, blurred by the frost. A face looking up at him from beneath the ice. Mark stumbled backward, heart hammering. His glass fell and shattered on the floor, startling Jenna awake. What happened? She gasped. He pointed to the window, struggling to find words. There's something out there. In the lake, she frowned, half asleep. Mark, it's just the reflection. The ice plays tricks in the dark. He wanted to argue, but when he looked again, the light was gone. The surface of the lake was blank and still. He forced a weak laugh. Yeah, probably just my eyes. They went to bed not long after, but Mark didn't sleep. Every creak of the wood, every distant groan of shifting ice made his heart race. The storm outside intensified, wind whistling through the eaves. Around 3 a.m. he heard something else, a faint, rhythmic sound, tap, tap, tap. It was coming from beneath the floorboards. He sat up slowly, straining to listen. The sound continued, soft, deliberate, like knuckles rapping against wood. Jenna, he whispered, shaking her shoulder. She stirred groggily. What is it? Listen. They both held still. Tap, tap, tap. It came again. Her eyes widened. It's probably the pipes, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. There are no pipes, Mark said quietly. It's a wood cabin. He grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and got out of bed. The air was freezing. He followed the sound through the narrow hall toward the living room. Each step creaked under his boots. The tapping continued, now directly beneath the floor. Under the rug by the fireplace, he knelt down, pressed his ear to the wood. Silence, then dash tap. Right beneath his ear, he yanked his head back, heart thundering. There's something under here, he whispered. Jenna stood behind him, hugging herself. Mark, stop. You're freaking me out. He pulled the rug aside. Beneath it was a square outline, a trapdoor, covered with years of dust and age. They stared at it. Neither of them had known it was there. Mark's breath trembled. This cabin's been here since the 1940s, he said. Maybe it's just old storage. But something in him knew it wasn't. He found the metal ring latch and pulled. The hinges groaned. A gust of stale, cold air rose up, thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. He shone his flashlight down. Wooden steps led into darkness. Jenna grabbed his arm. Don't, she whispered. Please, Mark. Let's wait until morning. He hesitated. Just a quick look. He descended slowly, the wooden steps creaking underfoot. The air grew colder the farther he went. The beam of his light cut through dust and cobwebs until it reached the bottom, a small dirt cellar. It was empty, except for one thing. A trapdoor in the floor. Another one, this one made of iron. It looked ancient, its hinges rusted, its surface carved with strange circular markings that looked almost like symbols. And in the center, a small glass window fogged from the inside. Mark knelt. He wiped away the frost from the glass with his sleeve and screamed. Behind the glass, inches from his face, was an eye. A human eye, pale and frozen open. He stumbled back, crashing into the stairs. The flashlight clattered across the dirt. "Mark!" Jenna called from above. He scrambled up the steps, slamming the wooden hatch shut behind him. His heart felt like it was trying to tear out of his chest. "What happened?" Jenna shouted. He could barely get the words out. There's something down there." They didn't sleep again that night. They sat together by the fire, the storm howling outside. Every few minutes, the wood stove would pop, and both of them would jump. By dawn, the storm had passed. Leaving an eerie stillness behind, Mark went to the window, half expecting to see that same light beneath the ice again. But the lake was empty, smooth still. He turned to Jenna. "We're leaving now." She nodded without a word. They packed quickly. But when Mark stepped outside to load the truck, he froze. The footprints, those small bare prints, were back. But this time, they didn't lead away from the dock. They led toward the cabin, straight to the door. His breath caught. "Jenna, don't open." The front door creaked behind him. "Mark," she called. "What's wrong?" He turned just as something flashed at the edge of his vision. The ice on the lake had begun to crack, long fractures snaking outward like veins. Beneath the surface, faint shapes moved. He backed toward the truck. "Get inside," he whispered. "Now." She followed his gaze and screamed. A hand broke through the ice, small, grey. Fingers stretched toward the air. Then another, and another, dozens of hands, pressing against the surface from below, as if many somethings were trapped just beneath, trying to claw their way out. The sound was horrible, the ice groaning, popping, splintering. The reflection of the cabin shimmered across the surface like a ghost. "Mark, what is that?" Jenna sobbed. He didn't answer. He grabbed her hand and ran for the truck. The engine sputtered but refused to start. He turned the key again and again, panic flooding his veins. From the frozen lake came a low, vibrating hum. It wasn't wind, it was deeper, like the sound of the earth itself moving. Then the ice shattered. A massive crack ripped across the surface. Water surged up in a violent rush, spraying mist into the air. And for a brief moment, just before the fog swallowed everything, Mark saw them bodies, dozens of them, half transparent, pale as the moon. Men, women, and children, all suspended in the ice like a frozen crowd, their faces locked in silent screams. The hum grew louder, the ground shook. Mark's world went white. He woke some time later to silence. The storm had returned, burying the cabin and lake beneath fresh snow. The truck was half submerged in a drift, the engine dead. Jenna sat beside him, eyes wide and unblinking, her lips blue. He shook her, calling her name, but she didn't move. Her skin was cold as glass. He stumbled from the truck, staggering toward the lake. It looked untouched again, smooth and endless. No cracks, no bodies, no sign of what he'd seen. But when he reached the dock, he froze. A light flickered beneath the ice again. Slowly drifting closer, he fell to his knees, breath fogging the air. "No, please, no." The light rose until it was just beneath the surface. And there, staring up at him through the frost, was Jenna's face. Eyes open, lips moving silently. Then her hand pressed against the ice, palm out, fingers trembling. Mark screamed until his throat bled. They found the cabin 3 days later. The authorities said the lake had refrozen overnight after a brief thaw. No bodies were recovered. The truck was still there, doors open, engine frozen solid. But there was one strange detail in the report. A set of bare footprints leading from the truck to the edge of the lake. Just one set. No return tracks, and beneath the ice, near the dock. Search teams said they found something unusual, what looked like a faint light glowing deep below, moving slowly, almost like a lantern. The last place Sarah Delaney expected to end up that November was back in her hometown of Maple Hollow. She'd left the tiny Montana town 10 years ago and swore she'd never come back, not after what happened to her brother, Eli. But life has a cruel sense of humor. Her mother's health was failing, the family farmhouse was falling apart, and Sarah had run out of excuses. So she packed up her car and drove 6 hours through endless pine forests and grey, snow-filled skies, following the same cracked road she'd taken as a child. It was strange how little had changed. The gas station still had the same flickering neon sign. The same rusted playground stood by the church. Even the air smelled the same, a mix of wet pine and cold iron. But as Sarah drove deeper into the valley, she noticed something odd. There were no people outside. Every house she passed had its curtains drawn tight. No smoke from chimneys. No tire tracks on the snowy roads. It was as if the town had simply stopped breathing. When she finally reached the farmhouse, dusk had already fallen. The house stood at the end of a dirt road that wound through a field of black, brittle grass. Its paint was peeling, its porch sagging, and yet, as she stepped out of the car, she could feel it, that strange, heavy silence pressing down on everything. The same silence she remembered from the night. Her brother disappeared. The inside of the house was exactly as she'd left it. Her mother, now frail and pale, greeted her weakly from a rocking chair near the fire. "Sarah," she said softly, voice trembling. "You came, of course, Mum." They hugged, but there was distance between them, not emotional, but spiritual, like they were both standing in the shadow of something too big to name. As Sarah helped her mother to bed that night, she asked, "Mum, where is everyone?" "The town looks empty." Her mother's hands tightened around the blanket. "They stay inside," she whispered, "especially in November." Sarah frowned. "Why?" Her mother didn't answer. She just stared toward the window, her eyes glassy with fear. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls, and somewhere outside, she thought she heard something moving, slow, deliberate steps crunching through the frost dot. At first, she assumed it was an animal, but then there came a soft, steady knock on the front door. 3 times. She froze in bed, heart pounding. The knock came again. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint, polite, almost human. "Mum," she whispered. "Did you hear that?" But her mother's breathing was slow and even. Still asleep, Sarah threw on her robe, grabbed the flashlight, and crept down the hall. The knocking stopped. She reached the door and looked through the peephole. Led nothing, just snow falling through the dark. She exhaled shakily, hand on the knob. Then a whisper, soft, right outside, "Sarah." She stumbled back from the door, eyes wide. The flashlight beam shook in her trembling hand. "Eli," she whispered before she could stop herself. The wind outside moaned through the trees. Morning came cold, and grey. Her mother didn't remember hearing anything. But Sarah couldn't shake the unease. Breakfast. She finally asked, "Mum, do you still think about him? About Eli?" Her mother's spoon froze halfway to her lips. "Don't say his name," she whispered. "Why?" Her mother's eyes darted toward the window again. "Because he comes when you call him." Sarah felt a chill crawl up her spine. Her mother sighed and set down the spoon. "Every year since he went missing, people disappear from Maple Hollow in November. Always in the woods. Always at night. Some say it's a man. Some say it's something wearing the shape of one." Sarah frowned. "That's just a story." Her mother's voice trembled. "They call it the visitor. He knocks 3 times. And if you open the door, he takes you." Sarah tried to laugh it off, but deep down, she remembered that sound, that knocking, and she remembered the night Eli vanished, the way he'd said, "Someone's calling me outside," just before he walked out into the dark. They never found him. Only his footprints leading into the woods, stopping at the frozen creek. That afternoon, Sarah drove into town. She needed answers, or maybe just a reason to believe her. Mother's story wasn't true. The gas station was the only place open. Behind the counter sat an old man in a thick coat, staring blankly at the small TV. When she walked in, he looked up, startled. "You're a Delaney," he said quietly. "Yeah," she replied. "Sarah, I used to live here." He nodded slowly. "Thought so. You look like your brother." Her stomach twisted. "You knew him." Everyone knew him. The old man's voice lowered. "You shouldn't have come back." "Why does everyone keep saying that?" She snapped his side and leaned closer. "Because once the knocking starts, it doesn't stop. You can ignore it, but he keeps coming. Always polite. Always patient. Folks tried moving away, but he finds them. Same night every year, November 13th. She blinked. "That's tonight." The man's expression hardened. "Then you best lock your doors." That evening, Sarah double-checked every lock in the house. She nailed shut the old windows and drew the curtains tight. Her mother sat silently by the fire, eyes unfocused. Outside, the world was still. No wind, no snow. Just that suffocating quiet around midnight. The power went out. The lights flickered, then died, leaving only the fire's orange glow. Her mother whispered, "He's coming." "Mom, stop," Sarah said, trying to sound calm. "It's just the storm." But there was no storm. Only silence. Then knock, 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 3 times. Slow. Even Sarah froze. Her mother started to cry. "Don't answer it." But the sound came again, louder this time. Tap, tap, tap. And then a voice. "Sarah." "It's me." It was Eli's voice. Her blood ran cold. She whispered, "That's not possible." The voice came again, closer. "Please, Sarah. It's cold out here. Let me in." Her heart twisted. The voice was perfect, the same gentle tone, the same rhythm. Every childhood memory screamed for her to open that door. But her mother's voice broke through the haze. "That's not your brother." "That's it." Sarah stepped closer to the door, trembling. "What do you want?" Silence then. The whisper again, right by her ear, as if it were inside the keyhole, to come home. The doorknob began to turn, ever so slowly. Sarah lunged forward and held it still with both hands. The metal was ice cold, biting into her palms. Then the voice changed, deeper, distorted, like 2 people speaking at once. "Let me in, Sarah." The door shuddered under a violent blow. She screamed and stumbled back. Her mother began to pray under her breath, tears streaking her face. The banging grew louder, faster, until suddenly it stopped. Silence. Then a faint scratching sound. Sarah crept closer and saw thin, black lines appearing along the wood, claw marks, slowly carving downward. She backed away. "This isn't happening," she whispered. The fire flickered, dimmed, and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. When morning came, the house was freezing. The door was covered in scratches, and strange symbols had been carved into the wood, circles with slashes through them, drawn over and over. Her mother refused to speak. She sat staring at the fireplace, lips moving soundless lie. Sarah packed her bags. "We're leaving," she said firmly. "Today." But her mother didn't respond, so Sarah carried her things to the car alone. The air outside was heavy, unmoving. As she loaded the trunk, she noticed something in the snow. Footprints, bare, small, leading from the woods. To the house, her breath hitched. She followed them slowly, her boots crunching softly. The prints led around the porch, to the back door, where she found something half buried in the frost. A small, wooden toy truck. She picked it up with shaking hands. It was Eli's, the same toy he'd carried the night he vanished. Her throat closed. No. She ran back inside, but her mother's chair was empty. The blanket lay crumpled on the floor. The front door stood wide open, snow blowing through the frame. "Mum." No answer. She grabbed her flashlight and followed the footprints back toward the woods. The trees loomed tall and black, their branches rattling like bones. The footprints went deeper, winding between the trunks, until they stopped at a clearing near the frozen creek, the same place Eli's tracks had ended all those years ago. Her flashlight flickered. In the middle of the clearing stood a figure, small, barefoot. She whispered. The figure turned. It was a boy, pale, thin eyes dark and hollow. His lips moved soundlessly. Then he raised his arm and pointed behind her. Sarah spun around and screamed. Her mother stood there, but her face was wrong. Her skin hung loose and grey, eyes black as coal. Her mouth opened far too wide, and from it came that same distorted voice. "You let him in." Sarah stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight. It rolled across the snow, beams spinning wildly. The boy and the thing wearing her mother's face began walking toward her, their steps perfectly synchronized. "Stay back." She screamed. They didn't stop. The boy's voice was soft now, almost kind. "You came back for me." Sarah turned and ran. Branches clawed at her hair, her clothes. She didn't dare look back. The woods echoed with whispers, her name spoken over and over in different voices. When she finally broke through the trees, the farmhouse was gone. In its place stood an old, burned-out shell of wood and ash, blackened and broken. She stared in disbelief. No, that's not." She turned toward the road, but it wasn't there either. Just endless white fields stretching in every direction, and faintly, beneath the snow, she could hear it again. Tap, 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 right under her feet. The blizzard came down like a wall, thick, suffocating, endless. By the time Evan Holt saw the faded neon sign of the Silver Pines Motel, his knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel. He hadn't seen another car in nearly an hour, and his gas gauge hovered just above empty. The radio had gone to static somewhere past mile marker 49, and the snow now fell so hard that even his high beams were useless. The motel appeared like a mirage through the swirling white 10 rooms lined in a row. A flickering sign above the office that buzzed weakly in the cold. Vacancy. Evan sighed with relief. He wasn't supposed to stop. He was supposed to be halfway to Spokane by now, starting his new job in the morning. But when the highway vanished beneath snow, he'd turned off at the only visible exit. The GPS had given up miles back, its digital voice repeating, recalculating, until it died. The wind howled through the pines as he stepped out of the car. The cold was immediate, piercing through his jacket and gloves. The snow under his boots made a dull, wet crunch, the kind that seemed to echo too far. The lobby was dimly lit, one yellow bulb buzzing above the counter. A small bell sat beside an ancient sign-in book. Evan rang it. After a few seconds, a man appeared from the back office, tall, thin, and pale, with sunken eyes that didn't blink often enough. His nametag read, Russell. Rough night to be on the road, Russell said with a dry chuckle. Yeah, Evan replied, trying to smile. Didn't expect the storm to hit this bad. It's the mountains, Russell said, handing him a key on a metal ring. Weather's unpredictable here. You're lucky you found this place. Been quiet all week. Evan glanced around. The motel was silent. No other cars in the lot, no footprints besides his own. Nobody else staying here. Not tonight, Russell said. You'll have your peace. Something about the way he said it made the back of Evan's neck prickle. Room 7 was at the far end of the row. The door creaked as he pushed it open. The room was simple, 2 twin beds, a small table, an old TV, and faded curtains that barely covered the window. The air smelled faintly of dust and something else. Something metallic. He locked the door, turned on the heater, and collapsed onto the bed. The wind outside screamed against the windows, rattling the thin glass. He thought he heard footsteps in the snow once or twice, but told himself it was just the storm. Around midnight, the heater began to sputter. Evan groaned and got up to check it, but as he bent down, he heard it, a faint sound outside the door. Dot, knock, knock, 2 soft taps. He frowned. Then came a muffled voice. Sir, sorry to bother you. It's the front desk. Relieved, Evan opened the door a few inches. The snow whipped in. A man stood there, not Russell. This one was younger, maybe in his late 20s, wearing the same pale uniform but no jacket. His skin looked almost grey under the light. Sorry, the man said. We need you to sign one more form. Routine. Evan blinked. Now, in the middle of the night. The man smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just a quick signature, please. Something in his voice was off, flat, hollow. Evan hesitated. Can it wait until morning? The man's smile faded. His eyes darkened slightly. No, we don't like delays here. Evan's stomach turned. I'll come by the office in the morning. He closed the door, but before the latch clicked, he heard the man whisper through the crack, You shouldn't have stopped here. The words chilled him to the bone. He locked the door and backed away slowly, his breath quickening. When he peeked through the curtain, the man was gone. The snow outside was untouched. No footprints. Sleep was impossible. Every creak made his heart jump. Around 2 a.m., the TV turned on by itself, static filling the dark room. Evan grabbed the remote and turned it off, but it flickered back on seconds later. The static shifted, and faint images began to appear, shadows moving behind a frosted pane. Then a voice came through the speaker. Room 7. Evan froze. He muted the TV. The voice kept speaking. Room 7, it repeated, softer now. He's still awake. The heater died completely then, the air turning icy. Evan's breath fogged. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He turned the TV off again, pulled on his coat, and decided he'd had enough. He grabbed his keys and opened the door, but the world outside was wrong. The snow had stopped falling. The sky was black, starless. The air felt thick, like breathing through glass. And the motel looked different. The neon sign wasn't flickering anymore. It wasn't even lit. The office windows were boarded up. Half the rooms looked burned, their doors hanging open like empty mouths. Evan turned back to his car, but there were no tracks. Not from him, not from his tires. Just untouched snow. His car was still there, half buried, but when he tried the handle, it wouldn't move. The metal was frozen solid, the inside covered in frost. Then, faintly, he heard it again, knock, knock, but this time it came from inside room 7. He turned slowly. The door he'd left open was now closed. The lights inside were off. A shadow moved behind the curtain, tall, thin, with its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Evan's heart hammered. He stumbled backward, his boots crunching loudly in the snow. The door creaked open again, and that same young man stepped out. Only now, his skin was even paler, stretched tight over his face. Eyes black and empty. "You can't leave," he said softly. Evan ran. He sprinted across the lot, snow blinding him. The highway had vanished into white void. No landmarks, no sound but his own ragged breath. When he looked back, the motel seemed farther away than it should have been, as if the distance between them had stretched. Still, he ran until his legs burned. Then he saw something ahead, a dim red glow through the snow. Tail lights, a car, parked on the side of the road. He stumbled toward it, waving his arms. "Hey, wait." When he reached it, he froze. It was his car, same dent in the fender, same air freshener swinging from the mirror. But the engine was running, and through the fogged windshield, he saw someone sitting in the driver's seat. It was him. Evan stared, paralyzed. The figure inside turned its head slowly toward him. Same face, same expression, then the double smiled and whispered something he couldn't hear through the glass. Evan stumbled backward, heart pounding. He turned and the motel was gone. Only the sign remained, half buried in the snow. Its letters faintly glowing, Silver Pines. Only half the word vacancy was visible now. He heard footsteps behind him. Soft, deliberate. When he spun around, Russell stood there, half his face shadowed, half illuminated by the snow. "I told you, it's quiet here," he said calmly. "You wanted peace, didn't you?" Evan backed away. "What is this place?" Russell smiled, a slow, unnatural stretch of his mouth. "A stopover. For what? For the ones who never made it through the storm." The world shifted. The air went still. The sound of the wind vanished entirely. Evan blinked, and he was standing in the lobby again. The bell on the counter gleamed. The heater hummed. He looked down. His name was already written in the guest book. But the date wasn't right. It said November 14th, 1982. He backed away, shaking. No, no, that's not. Then he noticed something else. The pages behind his name were filled with hundreds of signatures, each one written on a different November night, and each one had the same checkout date. Never. He dropped the book and ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. He slammed against it again and again until something cracked his shoulder or the frame. He couldn't tell when it finally gave. He burst outside into blinding white. The storm was back, roaring round him. He couldn't see the motel anymore, only the endless snow and the faint outline of trees. He kept walking. 10 steps, 20, 50, then silence again. The snow stopped mid-air. He turned around. The motel stood there, but now every window glowed with light. Behind each pane, he could see figures standing motionless, staring out at him. Men, women, children, their faces pale and still, their eyes hollow. And in one window, room 7, he saw himself, standing perfectly still, watching morning came bright and bitterly cold. A snowplow driver passing through spotted a single car parked on the shoulder near mile marker 49. The engine was running. Inside sat a man in his 30s, eyes open, hands gripping the wheel. The car heater was on full blast, but the driver's body was frozen solid. The strange thing was the receipt, found in his pocket. It was from the Silver Pines Motel. Dated November 13th, the motel had been closed for 40 years, ever since a fire destroyed it in 1982, killing the owner and 7 guests, every year since. Drivers had reported seeing its flickering sign through the snow, always during storms, always near mile 49. Locals call it the frozen stopover. They say if you're caught in a blizzard there, and you see that faint neon glow, don't pull over, because once you check into Silver Pines, you never really leave. It was late November in a quiet Minnesota town called Birch Hollow, a place where the snow never truly stopped falling, and where even silence seemed to echo. The pond at the edge of town had frozen weeks earlier, smooth as glass, untouched except for the tracks of deer and the occasional brave child who dared to slide across its surface. Locals said the pond was cursed, that beneath its black water rested more than just fish and reeds. But like most small-town legends, it was whispered and dismissed, until someone disappeared. That someone was Lucas Ward, a 32-year-old truck mechanic who lived alone in a small cabin near the woods. Lucas wasn't the type to believe in ghost stories. He worked long hours, came home, heated canned chili, and watched reruns until he fell asleep on the couch. His world was as quiet as the frozen forest around him. But on one particularly cold night, the kind that froze the air in your lungs, Lucas woke to a sound that didn't belong. It was faint at first, slow tapping. He thought it might have been the wind, maybe an icicle breaking loose. But then it came again. Tap, ... tap. This time it was deliberate, measured, coming from outside. Lucas groaned, rubbing his eyes. He glanced at the clock, 2:47 a.m. He slipped on his coat and boots and opened the door, expecting to see a branch against the siding. Instead, he saw only the wide, white expanse of the frozen world beyond his porch. The trees stood still, skeletal shadows under the moonlight. The sound stopped the second he stepped outside. He took a slow breath. The cold stung his lungs. His eyes drifted toward the pond about 50 yards away, just visible beyond the trees. It shimmered faintly under the moon. And that's when he saw it's something standing at the center of the ice. A man, at least. It looked like one. Lucas squinted, stepping closer. The figure was tall, dark against the shimmering white. It wasn't moving, just standing perfectly still, facing his direction. For a long, uneasy minute, Lucas didn't move either. Then he blinked, and the figure was gone. Just empty ice and drifting snow. He exhaled sharply, laughing under his breath. "Get it together, man," he muttered, heading back inside. But as he shut the door, he swore he heard it again tap. Tap now from somewhere behind the cabin. He slept with the TV on that night, trying to drown out the wind. The next morning, he convinced himself it had been nothing. Maybe kids fooling around near the pond. But as he stepped outside to start his truck, something caught his eye. Leading from the back of his cabin all the way to the frozen pond were footprints, bare footprints. Lucas froze. The snow was thick, fresh, untouched except for those prints-deep impressions that led straight across the yard. He crouched to look closer. They weren't small. Whoever made them had big feet and long toes. The prints weren't normal. He followed them all the way to the edge of the pond. They stopped there. The ice stretched out smooth and perfect, no cracks, no breaks, just white silence. Lucas stared at the center, remembering the shadow he'd seen last night. A cold shiver ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the weather. That night, the tapping came again. Louder, Lucas sat up in bed, heart pounding. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it came from the window by the foot of his bed. He turned slowly, eyes adjusting to the dark, and saw something pressed against the glass. A hand, pale, long, fingers thin as twigs, nails cracked and blackened. The palm was flat against the glass, trembling slightly. Lucas froze. The hand slid downward with a long, slow screech, leaving a trail of frost on the pane. Then it was gone. He jumped from bed, grabbed the flashlight, and threw open the door. Outside, snow whirled violently in the wind. Nothing moved but the trees. He shone the light around the side of the cabin. No footprints this time. No handprints. Just snow. He stood there for a moment. Every sound amplified, the crunch beneath his boots, the wind whistling through the pines, his own breathing. Then something whispered his name, Lucas. He spun toward the pond. There, at the edge, stood the figure, again motionless, its reflection shimmering faintly under the flashlight beam. Lucas raised the light. The figure was clearer now. It looked like a man wearing an old winter coat, soaked and torn. His head tilted slightly, as though his neck couldn't hold its weight. The face was wrong grey, lips dark, eyes sunk deep, and then, before Lucas could even move, the figure stepped backward onto the ice and vanished beneath it, like falling through glass. The pond rippled once, then went still. Lucas stumbled back, dropped the flashlight, and ran inside, slamming the door. He didn't sleep. The next morning, he went into town. The local sheriff, a heavy man named Harris, listened quietly as Lucas told him everything: the man on the ice, the footprints, the whisper. When he finished, Harris just shook his head. "That pond's been trouble for years," he said. "Used to be a sawmill there, back in the 1930s. Dam broke one winter. Whole crew went under when the ice collapsed. Town pulled out for bodies. Never found the fifth. Lucas frowned. You think I saw him? Harris shrugged. I think you saw what the cold wanted you to see. The sheriff laughed softly after that. But Lucas, he drove home with his stomach in knots. That evening, the power went out. The storm outside had grown fierce, shaking the cabin walls. Lucas lit a lantern, its dim flame flickering across the frost-lined windows. He tried to read, but couldn't focus. His mind kept drifting to the pond, to that pale hand on the glass. The storm outside grew louder, until it almost sounded like voices, then dash tap. Tap, tap. He froze. The sound came again, from the kitchen window this time, then from the wall, then the back door, tap, 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 all around the cabin. Lucas grabbed his hunting rifle, hands trembling. He shouted, "Who's out there?" The wind swallowed his words, and then came the creak, the sound of wood bending under weight. From the roof, Lucas aimed upward. Snow fell through the chimney, hissing against the fire. He heard slow, deliberate steps moving across the ceiling, right above him. Then, silence. He stood, frozen, the only sound his own heart pounding in his ears. He took a step toward the back door, gripping the handle tight. A faint voice whispered from the other side, "Lucas, it's so cold." He jerked back, dropping the rifle. The doorknob began to turn slowly on its own. He grabbed a chair and jammed it under the handle, stumbling backward until his back hit the wall. The doorknob stopped turning. Then, from outside, came a single, sharp crack, like ice splitting. Then another, and another. He knew the sound. The pond. He pressed his face to the window, peering out through the blur of snow. At first, he saw nothing but darkness. Then the light of the lantern flickered just enough to show movement in the distance figures. Not one, not two, five, all standing on the ice, all facing his cabin. The wind howled louder. The figures didn't move, didn't speak. They just stood there, black against the white, their shapes wavering in the snow. Lucas whispered a prayer under his breath. He blinked, and the figures were closer, halfway across the yard. He stumbled back, grabbing the rifle again. He raised it, aimed through the window, but his hands shook too hard to fire. He blinked again. They were gone. He exhaled shakily, "No, no, no, no." Then came the sound behind him, wet, heavy breathing. He turned. The man from the pond was inside, standing right there in his living room, water dripping from his clothes, pooling on the floor. His skin was pale, bloated, his eyes cloudy white. He stared at Lucas, lips parting to speak. When he did, his voice sounded like wind through a hollow reed. "You took my place." Lucas stumbled backward. What? What are you talking about?" The man took a step forward, water dripping onto the wood floor with each movement. "The ice breaks every year," he whispered. "Someone always falls in. That's the rule." Lucas raised the gun, fired. The shot echoed through the cabin, shattering the window. But the figure didn't fall. It only smiled, mouth opening wider than humanly possible. A cold blast of air flooded the room, extinguishing the lantern. The fire went out. Everything went black. When the storm cleared the next morning, Sheriff Harris drove out to check on him. The front door was wide open, snow drifting inside. Lucas was gone. There were wet footprints all over the floor, leading out toward the pond. Harris followed them cautiously. They stopped right at the edge of the ice. The pond was smooth, untouched, no hole, no cracks. just the faint shimmer of something dark beneath the surface. He leaned closer, squinting. For a moment, he thought he saw a reflection. Then he realized it wasn't his. It was Lucas. Eyes open, skin pale, pressed against the underside of the ice as though frozen mid-scream. That winter, no one went near the pond. But when the thaw came in spring, the ice melted early that year except for one patch near the center. A patch that stayed solid, and on quiet nights, when the moon hits the water just right, some say you can still see a man standing there, just below the surface, watching, waiting for the next November storm, because in Birch Hollow, the ice always takes one. It was the night of November 21st, 2018. The roads were empty, buried beneath the kind of snow that swallows the world whole. The weather forecast had warned against travel, but Hannah Price didn't have a choice. Her mother was sickly sickened. She needed to get to Duluth before morning. Her old silver Subaru roared weakly against the wind, its headlights slicing through the storm like two dying candles. For the first 2 hours, the trip was uneventful. Just her, the endless white, and the low hum of the engine. But by the time she crossed Highway 61, the snow thickened into a wall of blinding chaos. She could barely see the yellow lines anymore. Each passing minute pulled her further from civilization, deeper into the frozen wilds of northern Minnesota. Then, in the middle of nowhere, her radio crackled, static hissed. Then, faintly a voice. "Do not stop." The car. Hannah frowned, tapping the dashboard. The radio was old, prone to interference. She twisted the knob just static. Then the voice came again, louder this time. "Whatever you do, don't stop." Her pulse quickened. It didn't sound like an emergency broadcast. The voice was male, shaky, terrified. She tried to change the station. It didn't budge. The display flickered between 88.7 and 666 which shouldn't even exist. Must be the storm, she muttered, forcing a laugh. But when she looked up, something stood in the middle of the road. A man. Hannah slammed the brakes. The tires skidded across the icy asphalt, the car spinning sideways until it stopped just short of the figure. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. The man didn't move. He stood motionless in the headlight store, wearing an old trench coat dusted with snow. His face was hidden beneath a hood. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he raised one gloved hand and pointed toward the passenger side window. Hannah hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to. But she cracked the window just enough to hear him. His voice was low, strained. "Please, help me, my car. It's gone off the road." His breath fogged in the cold air. She looked past him, squinting through the snow. Sure enough, a dark shape, maybe a vehicle, was half buried in a ditch about 30 feet off the road. Hannah's conscience twisted. She couldn't just leave him there. "Get in," she said finally. He didn't thank her. He just opened the door and sat down. For the first few miles, they drove in silence. The only sounds were the wind outside and the rhythmic squeak of the wipers struggling against the ice. Hannah tried to start conversation. "Are you okay? You must have been out there a while." The man didn't look at her. "A long time," he said softly. His voice was strange flat, emotionless. "The storm took me off the road. My wife. She didn't make it. I'm sorry, Hannah murmured. We'll get to town soon. There's a gas station about 10 miles ahead. He nodded slowly, still staring straight ahead. 10 miles. I remember that what? She asked, but he didn't answer. A few minutes later, the radio came to life, again just static. Then that same voice from before. Do not. Let him stay in the car. Hannah froze. Her eyes darted toward her passenger. He hadn't reacted. He just sat there, still as stone, staring out the windshield. The voice grew louder, distorted. He isn't alive. Hannah's grip tightened on the wheel. Her breath quickened. She glanced at the man. His head turned slightly, as though he'd heard it too. Then he smiled, a small, lifeless curve of the lips. The radio went silent. The snow outside thickened until the road disappeared completely. Hannah could barely keep the car straight. Every few seconds, the Subaru threatened to fish. Her nerves were shredded. She tried again, her voice trembling. What's your name? He didn't answer, just exhaled, slow and heavy. His breath left no fog on the glass. Hannah's pulse raced. She glanced toward him again and realized something else. He wasn't wet, his coat, his hair bone dry. Despite standing out in the storm, a small part of her mind screamed to pull over, to get out, to run. But another part told her that stopping in the middle of nowhere, in a blizzard, was a death sentence. The man finally spoke again. You shouldn't have stopped. Her throat went dry. What? He turned his head, his eyes catching the dim dashboard light for the first time. They were pale, milky white, like two marbles of frozen glass. I tried to warn you, he said. They always stop. The car jerked violently to the right. Hannah screamed, spinning the wheel. But it was too late. The Subaru skidded off the road, crashing nose first into a snowbank. The engine sputtered, then died. For a moment, the only sound was the wind. Then she heard a faint scraping from the roof, like footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps, moving from the front of the car to the back. The man beside her didn't move, didn't even blink. What is that? She whispered. He smiled again, almost tenderly. They're coming. Who? The answer came as a whisper so faint it was almost carried away by the wind. The ones who took me. The car's interior lights flickered. The radio switched on by itself, blaring static. Beneath the noise, faint voices spoke, hundreds of them, overlapping, echoing. Hannah covered her ears. Stop it. Stop it. The man leaned closer. His breath was ice against her cheek. You should never drive these roads in November. The lights went out. The storm howled louder, shaking the car. Something banged against the side, once, twice, then harder. The doors rattled violently. Hannah fumbled for her phone, but it had no signal. She turned to the man, panic in her voice. We need to get out. We'll walk to the station. He didn't respond. She shook his shoulder. Hey, come on. His head lolled toward her. His face had changed. The skin had gone pale grey. The lips cracked. His eyes were still wide open, lifeless. Hannah screamed, fumbling for the door handle. It wouldn't open. She shoved it, kicked it, but it was frozen shut. The scraping above grew louder. Closer, thud. Something landed on the hood, through the snow-caked windshield. She saw shapes, dark, human-shaped forms crawling over the car, their faces pressed against the glass, mouths open in silent screams. Frost spread wherever they touched. Hannah cried out, "Please, go away." The radio blared again, drowning her out. Do not stop. Do not stop. Do not stop. Desperate, she twisted the key. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared back to life. She slammed her foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, spinning back onto the road. The shapes slid off, vanishing into the snow. Her heart pounded as she sped blindly through the storm. She didn't look at the man beside her. She didn't dare. Minutes passed. The road ahead cleared slightly. She could see faint lights in the distance, the gas station. She exhaled shakily, tears freezing on her cheeks. Almost there, she whispered. Then softly, the man beside her said, You missed it. She glanced out the window. The gas station was behind them. But she hadn't turned. The world outside had changed. The snow was gone. The trees were gone. The road itself seemed to stretch into an endless grey void. No horizon, no light. Just a tunnel of darkness and faint falling ash dot. Her hands trembled on the wheel. Where are we? The man looked at her with something like pity. Still driving, he said. Like the rest of us? Hannah's breath caught. What do you mean, the rest of us? He pointed ahead. Through the swirling haze, she began to see movement. Cars, dozens of them. Old models, their headlights glowing faintly as they drove silently through the mist, each one packed with passengers staring blankly ahead. People who stopped. The man whispered. People who didn't listen. Hannah's voice broke. No, no, this isn't real. He smiled faintly. Neither are we. The Subaru began to slow on its own. The steering wheel jerked from her hands, spinning toward the edge of the road, though there was no road anymore, just darkness. The man turned to her one last time. It's cold out there, he said softly. You might want to keep driving. And then he was gone, just gone. The seat beside her, empty dot. The car rolled to a stop. Silence, for a moment. Hannah sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. Then, faintly, she heard it again, the radio crackling back to life. Static, then a voice, her own, whatever you do. Don't stop. 3 days later, a plow driver found Hannah's Subaru buried in a snowdrift 20 miles outside Duluth. The engine was off. The doors locked from the inside. The seat beside her was wet, as though someone had been sitting there. Her body was frozen stiff, one hand gripping the steering wheel, the other holding her phone. The last message on the screen was typed, but unsent. There's someone in the car with me. The radio still played faint static when they towed the car away, and just before they turned it off, the officer swore he heard a faint whisper through the speaker's soft, almost pleading. It was the first real cold snap of November when the strange footprints appeared outside Harper's Diner, the only 24-hour place open along Route 63. The snow had come early, soft and heavy, blanketing the pine woods that surrounded the old highway. Most nights were quiet that time of year, truckers passing through, locals grabbing coffee after work. But that night the air had a different weight to it, the kind of cold that bit deep and didn't let go. Harper's Diner sat at the edge of nowhere, its neon sign buzzing weakly against the dark. Inside, the heater struggled to keep up, and the smell of burnt coffee hung in the air. Clara Jennings, the night waitress, wiped down the counter for the 5th time that hour. She was in her mid-30s, plain-faced, hair tied back. The kind of woman who'd spent so many years working, graveyard shifts that her body clock had forgotten daylight existed. Around 11:47 p.m., the bell above the diner door jingled. Clara looked up. A man stood in the doorway, half silhouetted by the snow behind him. He was tall, too tall, she thought at first glance, with a long, dark coat dusted in frost. His face was pale, his features sharp in the neon glow, and his eyes. Something about his eyes made her stomach tighten. They were green, not blue, not green, but the color of old smoke. He didn't say a word as he stepped inside. The wind followed him briefly before the door closed. "Evening," Clara said, forcing a polite smile. "You out late, huh?" The man nodded slowly. "Long drive," he said. His voice was quiet, almost like he was trying not to disturb the air around him. "Coffee, please." She poured him a cup and slid it across the counter. "You're lucky we're still open. Been slow tonight." He gave a small, polite nod and wrapped his long fingers around the cup. His hands looked strange, too thin, like there wasn't enough flesh on the bones. He took a sip, eyes never leaving her. Clara felt uneasy. Maybe it was the way he didn't blink much. Maybe it was how he kept his gloved left hand hidden in his coat pocket the entire time. "So, where you headed?" she asked, trying to fill the silence. He looked out the window. "Just passing through." "Through where?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he smiled faintly, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached the eyes. "Through here." Something about the way he said it made the air seem colder. 15 minutes passed. The man didn't order food, didn't ask for a refill, just sat there, sipping slowly. The diner was empty except for him and Clara, and the clock above the door ticked too loud. She tried to distract herself by checking the pie display. When she turned back, he was staring at the window. "You expecting someone?" she asked. He didn't answer. Then, without looking away, he said, "There's a car coming." Clara frowned. She stepped closer to the window. Sure enough, a pair of headlights cut through the snow, approaching fast along the empty highway. It was a red Ford pickup, engine loud, tires throwing slush. The truck pulled into the lot and parked crookedly beside the diner. Clara smiled in relief. "Guess we're busier than I thought." But the man's expression didn't change. He just said softly, "They shouldn't have come," before Clara could ask what he meant. The bell above the door rang again. 2 men walked in, local hunters. She recognized them. Tom Grady and his brother, Luke. They looked half frozen, faces red from the wind. "Evening, Clara," Tom said, stamping the snow off his boots. "Coffee for 2. Sure thing." They slid into a booth, laughing about something, but Clara noticed their laughter fade when they saw the tall man sitting at the counter. Luke leaned closer to Tom. "You see that guy?" He whispered, but not quietly enough. The stranger didn't react. Clara poured their coffees and brought them over. "Out late, huh?" she asked, trying to keep things normal. "Yeah," Tom said. "We were driven back from Milford." "You hear what happened out there?" She shook her head. "What?" Luke leaned forward. "Some guy went missing last night. They found his car by the woods door open, keys in the ignition, blood in the snow. Sheriff says they're still looking for him." Clara felt a chill crawl down her neck. "Jesus, in Milford?" "Yeah, about 40 miles up." She glanced toward the stranger. He was staring into his coffee, motionless. An hour passed. The hunters finished their coffee, joked about the cold, and got up to leave. Clara was refilling the pot when she noticed something strange. The man's reflection in the window wasn't there. She froze. The diner lights glowed bright behind her. She could see her own reflection clear as day. But where the stranger sat, there was only the empty stool. Her throat tightened. She blinked, looked again. Still nothing. She turned toward him, heart pounding. "Sir, do you need anything else?" He looked up slowly, his eyes dull and grey like ash. "No, I'm just waiting." "For what?" He smiled faintly. "For them." Before she could ask, the bell over the door jingled again. Tom and Luke had returned, faces pale and eyes wide. "Clara," Tom said, his voice shaking, There's something outside." "What?" "Tracks," Luke said. "They go around the diner. Big ones. Not human." Clara's stomach dropped. "What do you mean, not human?" "They look like hoof prints," Tom said, "but wrong. Like they're backwards." Clara's breath caught. "You're joking." "I'm not." The stranger stood up slowly. His chair made no sound on the tile floor. "You should leave," he said quietly. Tom frowned. "Excuse me." The man turned toward the window. Snowflakes whirled violently now, slamming against the glass. The neon sign outside flickered, then went dark. The diner lights dimmed. The heater stopped. A deep, vibrating sound echoed from somewhere beyond the parking lot, low and guttural, like the growl of something enormous. Luke stumbled back. What the hell was that? Clara's hands trembled as she reached for the phone. Dead, no dial tone. The stranger turned his head slightly. "It's too late." Then the windows shook. Hard. Something slammed into the side of the building once. Twice so hard the dishes rattled. A deep scraping sound followed, like claws dragging against metal. Tom grabbed the nearest thing he could find, a crowbar left near the back booth. "Stay here," he said. Heading for the door, Clara shouted, "Tom, don't," but he was already outside. The cold wind burst in behind him, through the glass. Clara saw him walk into the snow, flashlight beam swinging. "Nothing out here." He shouted, "Just tracks," then his voice cut off. Luke ran to the window. "Tom." The beam of the flashlight was spinning wildly now, then stopped. Something moved in the snow, a dark, tall shape, and then Tom's body hit the glass. Clara screamed as blood splattered across the window. His face was frozen in terror, mouth open, eyes glassy. Luke stumbled back, yelling, "Oh God, oh God." The stranger didn't move. He just stood there, watching calmly as the thing outside began to drag Tom's body away into the storm. Clara turned on him, panic giving way to anger. "What the hell is happening?" He looked at her with that same calm, grey stare. "It found him. It always does." "What found him?" He turned toward the door. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "Try me." He hesitated. Then, quietly, "It follows me." Clara blinked. "What?" "I try to leave it behind. I go from town to town. Every November, it finds me. It kills whoever's near." Luke shouted from the corner, voice cracking, "You brought that thing here." The man didn't answer. The walls shuddered again. A long, deep moan echoed outside, followed by the crunch of heavy steps circling the diner. Clara could see movement through the frosted glass. Something massive moving just beyond the light. She caught glimpses of it between gusts of snow, long limbs, too many joints, a pale shape hunched low to the ground. The stranger whispered, "It's here." Luke backed toward the kitchen. We gotta hide. Clara grabbed his arm. The freezer. They sprinted through the kitchen doors, the stranger following behind. The air was thick with panic. The metal surfaces reflecting the flicker of the emergency light. They shut themselves inside the walk-in freezer, the door sealing with a hiss. The sound outside grew louder, scraping, dragging. A low rumble that made the walls tremble. Luke was shaking uncontrollably. "We're dead. We're dead, Clara." "Shut up," she whispered, trying to listen. Then came the knock, slow, deliberate, 3 times against the freezer door. Clara clamped her hand over her mouth. The stranger whispered, "It's not trying to get in. It's waiting." "For what?" she hissed. "For me." He stepped back from the door. "It wants me. If I go, maybe it'll let you live." Clara's eyes widened. "No, don't open that door." But he was already turning the handle. The cold air burst in as he stepped out. "Wait," she screamed, but the door swung shut, trapping her and Luke inside. Through the narrow window, she saw the man walk into the dining area. The shadow outside loomed taller, pressing against the glass. Then the lights went out. All she heard was the wind, and the sound of something heavy being dragged away. Hours later, when the snow stopped, Clara finally forced the freezer door open. The diner was silent. The tables were overturned. The front windows shattered. Blood streaked across the floor, leading toward the parking lot. Luke was gone, and outside, in the new snow, only one set of footprints led away from the diner. Clara stumbled to the window, tears freezing on her face. The tracks were deep, one set of boots, and next to them, enormous backward prints, leading toward the woods. The stranger's car was gone by morning. State troopers arrived. They found no bodies, only the shattered remains of Harper's diner and the twisted door lying 20 feet from the building. Clara was taken to the hospital, barely coherent. She kept saying the same thing over and over. He came in for coffee. It followed him. The wind cut through Frost Hollow Road like a knife that November night. Snow whipped across the empty highway, forming drifts that swallowed the yellow dividing lines. The streetlights already sparse flickered and went out, leaving the road swallowed in near-total darkness. Most people had given up traveling that evening. Most people, that is, except Megan Carter, a college student returning home from a late study session at the library. Her old sedan groaned under the weight of the snow, tires slipping slightly on the ice. Megan's breath fogged the inside of the car as she squinted at the road ahead. She hated driving in storms, but she had no choice. Her parents were out of town, and the roads beyond Frost Hollow were already closed. Around 11:15 p.m., she passed the intersection with Crescent Pines, a cluster of abandoned cabins that had long been rumored to house something. Locals whispered about disappearances, strange noises, and flickering lights in the windows. She never believed the stories, until tonight. Her headlights caught movement at the edge of the road, something standing perfectly still, half buried in snow. At first, she thought it was a person waiting for a ride. A student hitchhiker maybe. But as she slowed, she noticed it. No footprints led to the spot. None. The snow had drifted over the ground. Without interruption, her heart hammered. The figure stepped into the dim glow of her headlights. Megan's breath caught. It was a man, or something like a man, His coat was heavy and black, his face obscured by a hood. His hands were pale, trembling slightly, and he didn't move naturally to stiff, almost like a mannequin. "Are you okay?" she called, forcing her voice to sound normal. The figure tilted its head slowly. Then, without warning, it sprinted alongside the car for a moment, matching her speed despite the snow's resistance. Megan slammed the brakes reflexively. The car skidded on the ice, tires spinning, and the figure disappeared into the darkness as if it had never been there. Megan's heart raced. She shook her head. "It's just nerves. Just stress. You're imagining things." She forced the car forward again, eyes glued to the winding road. About 20 minutes later, a bus appeared in the distance. Its headlights cut through the snow, painting the world in a pale yellow glow. Megan squinted. It was odd to see a bus on Frost Hollow this late. The bus driver waved her over, and she pulled to the shoulder. Inside, the bus was empty. Not a single passenger, though it should have been filled with late-night commuters. The driver, a gaunt man in his 50s, smiled faintly. "Going far tonight?" he asked, voice calm but strange, like it came from a tunnel. I just need to get through Frost Hollow," Megan said, shaking. He nodded, eyes narrowing. "You're in luck. I'm headed the same way." Relieved, Megan climbed aboard. The heater inside was weak, the hum of the engine low and uneven. The seats were old, worn and stained. She sat near the back, eyes glued to the window. Snow swirled outside, and everything felt slower, heavier, as if time had thickened. "Do you pick up many passengers here?" she asked nervously. The driver didn't answer. He just focused on the road, gloved hands tight on the wheel. Minutes passed. The road grew narrower, and the snow thicker. The bus rattled over ice patches, the engine groaning in protest. Megan's stomach churned. Something about the road felt wrong, and then she saw it. Shadows moving beside the bus. Dark figures that seemed to slither over the snow, moving in step with the wheels. She blinked. Then they were gone. Her phone buzzed. No signal, but the screen lit with a message from an unknown number. "Don't look behind the bus." Megan froze. Her heart pounded. She glanced at the rearview mirror, then out the rear window. The darkness stretched endlessly. "Nothing," she exhaled shakily. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe she was seeing things, but then she noticed the seats behind her, faint. Grey-shaped passengers she didn't remember boarding. Children in old-fashioned coats. A woman with a cracked porcelain face. A man whose eyes were pitch black, like coal. Megan's hands shook. Who are you?" she whispered. No one responded. They just stared forward, their faces expressionless. She turned back toward the driver. He glanced at her briefly. "We're almost there," he said softly. "Just keep moving." "Almost where?" she asked, voice trembling. He didn't answer as the bus climbed the final hill of Frost Hollow Road. The snow fell harder, visibility almost zero. The engine groaned louder. The headlights flickered. Shadows appeared again, this time much closer. Moving alongside the bus in perfect formation, they were humanoid but twisted. Limbs elongated unnaturally, faces hidden behind masks of frost. Their movements were jerky, unnatural. Each step they took on the snow left impressions that burned with an icy mist. Megan pressed herself against the window. Her breath came in short, hot bursts. The driver spoke again. "If you look at them, they'll come for you." "I won't," she whispered, eyes fixed straight ahead. But curiosity got the better of her. She turned her head just slightly, and one of them, tall, thin face, hidden beneath a hood, turned toward her. Its eyes glowed faintly orange through the snow. Its lips twisted in a grin that seemed impossible, wide enough to split the skin. Megan screamed, jerking back. The bus jolted violently. The next thing she knew, the bus slowed, coming to a stop in a small clearing she didn't recognize. Frost Hollow was gone. The familiar twisted pines replaced by a grey wasteland of dead trees and fog. The driver turned to her, pale and calm. "End of the line," he said. Megan's heart leaped. Where is this?" "This is where they wait," he said, and from the shadows, shapes emerged, dozens of them. Children, adults, the twisted humanoids she had glimpsed before. They surrounded the bus, stepping silently through the snow. Each pair of eyes glowed faintly, unblinking. The driver opened the door. Time to join them. Megan scrambled for the handle, tried to scream, but the bus engine roared. The snow swirled violently, blinding her. When she blinked, the figures had vanished. The bus was empty. The road stretched endlessly ahead, dark and silent. The driver was gone. She was alone. Hours or maybe minutes later, Megan's car was found by a passing trucker. He saw the bus parked on the side of the road, empty. Megan's car doors were locked, the engine off. Inside, she was gone. Only her phone remained on the passenger seat. The last message, typed but unsent, read, "The bus. It came for me. Don't ride it. Don't stop." Weeks later, locals driving Frost Hollow Road in November swear they sometimes see a bus in the distance, headlights glowing faintly through snowstorms. They say if you pass it, the air inside smells of frost and old coffee, and faint whispers echo through the speakers. Don't look behind the bus. Don't stop. Keep moving, or join us. Those who follow the whispers never return, and on cold November nights, the road seems to stretch longer than it should, endless, silent, and waiting.